Have you ever remembered something so clearly? Its color, its shape, even the way it felt, only to find out it never happened? Maybe it was a childhood cartoon that had a different logo, a movie line you could swear was quoted differently, or a famous person you know had passed away, until you saw them alive on TV years later. It's unsettling, isn't it? That moment when your certainty cracks. Across the world, millions share this feeling. Ordinary people, from every culture and language, all describing the same impossible memories, like fragments from a dream that somehow everyone has seen. These aren't just errors or slips of the mind. They feel real. They carry emotion, nostalgia, even grief. And when so many people remember the same thing that never was, something deeper seems to be at play. Welcome to the Mandela Effect, a phenomenon where collective memory defies recorded history. It began as a whisper in online forums and late-night discussions, but it soon became one of the most thought-provoking mysteries of modern consciousness. How can thousands remember Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the 1980s, when in this timeline, he lived until 2013? Where do these shared false memories come from? Are they simple mistakes of human recall, or could they be traces of another version of reality, one that brushes against our own? Scientists call it confabulation, the brain's way of filling gaps. Psychologists see it as the reshaping of memory under cultural influence. But others, philosophers, physicists, even quantum theorists, wonder if something far more profound is happening. Could our minds, in their mysterious depth, be reflecting not just the past, but the multiverse? Imagine time not as a straight line, but as a shimmering web, each strand a possible version of reality. In one, Mandela died. In another, he lived. And what if, for a fraction of a moment, those realities overlap? What if our consciousness, more fluid than we dare to believe, glimpses through that veil and carries the echo of a world that once was somewhere else? The Mandela Effect is more than a curiosity, it's a mirror. It forces us to question not only memory, but the very fabric of truth itself. When thousands remember what history denies, who decides which reality is real? And what if both are true, each in their own plane of existence? Tonight, we step into this mystery. We'll travel from psychology labs to the frontiers of quantum theory, from the fragile corridors of memory to the uncharted edges of parallel worlds. Because if memory can rewrite reality, then perhaps reality is remembering us. So tell me, when you close your eyes and picture that childhood logo, that movie line, that moment you know happened, are you remembering wrong, or remembering somewhere else? What if every false memory is proof that another version of you still remembers it as true? It began, as all great mysteries do, with a simple question. How could so many people remember Nelson Mandela dying in prison, when he didn't? In the mid-2000s, a writer named Fiona Broome attended a conference where the topic of Nelson Mandela came up casually in conversation. To her surprise, several people in the room agreed that they clearly remembered Mandela's death taking place decades earlier. In the 1980s, while he was still imprisoned, they remembered news broadcasts, televised funerals, speeches by grieving world leaders, and even the sight of mourning crowds. But in the official record, Nelson Mandela had lived until 2013, serving as South Africa's first black president and later becoming a global symbol of peace and reconciliation. The moment was jarring. How could so many unrelated people share the same vivid, yet entirely false, recollection? Fiona felt the weight of that paradox and coined a term for it, the Mandela Effect. It was not just about a single event, it was about a shared fracture in reality. She created a small website to discuss it, expecting only a few curious visitors. What followed was beyond anyone's imagination. Hundreds of people began writing in with their own examples of memories that didn't match reality. The posts poured in from around the world, each one different, yet strangely familiar. Some swore that the Berenstain Bears were once spelled Berenstein. Others were certain that the Monopoly Man had a monocle. Many remembered the brand Febreze, having 2 E's instead of 1. Movie lovers quoted Darth Vader saying, "Luke, I am your father," when the actual line was, "No, I am your father." The pattern was unmistakable. People were remembering alternate details of a shared reality that no longer existed. At first, the explanations were playful misprints, redesigns, simple human error. But the growing number of consistent discrepancies made it harder to dismiss. If each memory was a personal mistake, why were so many people making the same mistake, across continents, languages, and generations? The Mandela Effect became an online phenomenon. Forums turned into archives of collective déjà vu. What began as curiosity evolved into a psychological and philosophical inquiry. How stable is reality if our memories of it can shift so easily? Fiona Broome herself never claimed to have an answer. She simply posed the question, what if the memories are real, but from another timeline? The idea resonated deeply. For many, it provided a poetic bridge between psychology and quantum possibility. If there are infinite versions of the universe, as some interpretations of physics suggest, perhaps memory is not a static record, but a traveler between them, a bridge between what was and what could have been. It's easy to shrug off an isolated, misremembered detail. But when the same altered recollections echo across millions of minds, the boundary between perception and reality begins to blur. Was it ever just about Mandela's death? Or was it the first glimpse into something larger? An unseen network of intertwined histories, where each version of reality leaves faint fingerprints on the others. And so the question that started with a single man's life became something much greater. Are we all inhabitants of a universe that occasionally remembers differently? When thousands recall an event that never happened, is it merely a glitch of memory, or the quiet whisper of another world brushing against our own? Memory feels solid. We trust it to hold the truth of who we are, our childhood, our joys, our mistakes, our stories. Yet, science tells us something profoundly unsettling. Memory is not a recording. It's a reconstruction, a creative act that rebuilds the past every time we recall it. When you remember, your brain doesn't rewind a perfect film. Instead, it paints the moment anew, blending fragments of sensory input, emotions, and associations into a seamless narrative. Each recollection is a reimagining, influenced by your current thoughts, mood, and even the people around you. The neuroscientist Elizabeth Loftus, one of the world's leading experts on human memory, has shown just how malleable this process is. In her famous studies, she demonstrated that people could be made to remember entire events that never happened. Childhood trips to a shopping mall, encounters with strangers, even dramatic rescues. All it took was suggestion and repetition. Memory, it seems, is a storyteller trying its best to make sense of an ever-changing world. The more often we revisit a memory, the more we reshape it. It's like a photograph copied again and again, each iteration slightly blurrier, more open to interpretation. And yet, this is not a flaw. It's how the human mind keeps experience alive. Our memories are not static. They are living, breathing reflections of meaning. They evolve as we do. But what happens when these shifting reconstructions align across millions of people? When a whole generation remembers a movie line, a map, or a historical event exactly the same way, and all of them are wrong. Psychologists call these collective false memories. They arise when cultural cues, media, and social interactions reinforce a shared but inaccurate recollection. It's how stories spread, through films, songs, advertisements, and conversations that merge into a common mental landscape. Our minds are social instruments, built to mirror and synchronize with others. So when one version of the past dominates a culture's imagination, it becomes, at least psychologically, real. Every memory, no matter how personal, exists within a web of collective influence. Your recollection of a cereal box, a famous quote, or even a nation's history is shaped not just by your perception, but by the stories you've heard and the context you live in. From one perspective, the Mandela Effect could be the grand culmination of this collective storytelling, the point where culture and cognition blur the line between fact and feeling. From another, it hints at something stranger, that maybe our memories don't merely reflect consensus, they create it. If memory is a living process, could it be that our shared belief in an event, sustained by emotion and attention, actually anchors it into the fabric of reality itself? Could remembering, together, be an act of creation? Each time you recall your past, you're not just revisiting what was. You're choosing, reshaping, rebuilding it. And as billions of human minds remember their worlds into being, we might ask, are we remembering reality, or are we making it? It begins innocently enough with a logo, a lyric, a line from a movie. But soon you realize it's not just you. The world seems to remember differently. Across continents, people recall alternate details of the same things, as though two versions of reality once coexisted and then quietly merged. The examples have become iconic, strange cultural landmarks in our collective consciousness. Let's explore some of the most famous among them. You might remember the Berenstain Bears, a beloved children's series from the 1980s and 90s. But look again. Today, every book, every show, every official record spells it Berenstain, with an A, not an E. For thousands, this is more than a spelling issue. It's a disturbance. Whole childhoods seem to shift in an instant. Then there's Febreze. Many remember the familiar blue bottle reading Febreze, with two E's. Yet in this timeline, it has always been Febreze with one. Small detail, large reaction. The feeling of something quietly rewritten. Or take the Monopoly Man, the mascot of the board game, white mustache, top hat, and a monocle. Except, he's never worn one. Look through every edition, every ad, and you'll find the same unsettling truth. The monocle exists only in memory. The pattern continues. The fruit logo, fruit of the loom, once pictured with a cornucopia spilling its harvest. Now the cornucopia is gone, and apparently always has been. Even geography isn't immune. Many recall New Zealand lying to the west of Australia, not the southeast. Others insist Sri Lanka used to be directly under India, not slightly to the side. Maps change. The Earth's shape remains, but somehow it feels off. Then there are the movie lines echoing across time. Mirror, mirror on the wall, from Snow White. A phrase nearly every child knows. But watch the film today, and you'll hear magic mirror on the wall. Or Luke, I am your father. Perhaps the most famous line in cinema. Except it was never said. The actual line is simply, no, I am your father. Even the Pikachu of Pokemon fame seems different. Many remember a small black stripe at the tip of his tail. It's gone. Every original design shows a solid yellow tail. None of these examples by themselves prove anything. But taken together, they form a strange pattern, tiny fractures in the continuity of our shared world. These aren't errors in memory alone. They're collective shifts, where vast groups remember the same incorrect version. Each example is a ripple, subtle but persistent, as if reality has been edited, and our minds caught both versions. The question is, edited by what? Psychologists suggest these are cases of confabulation, where similar words, sounds, or cultural patterns blur together. But others see in these anomalies something far more extraordinary. A quiet hint that our timeline is not fixed, that history may flow and fold, blending versions of itself as easily as thoughts blend in the human mind. If our perception can hold two histories at once, then maybe the world itself can too. Maybe these small inconsistencies are not mistakes, but evidence of a deeper truth, that reality, like memory, is alive, constantly revising itself. And if that's true, then every logo, every quote, every detail we take for granted might be a thread in a much larger tapestry, one that rewrites itself when we're not looking. So ask yourself, when you remember the world as it was, are you recalling the past, or catching a glimpse of another version of now? If memory can bend, how far can reality follow? To explore that question, we have to look at the space between mind and matter, the invisible line where what we perceive begins to shape what we believe to be true. Science has long treated perception as a one-way process. Light hits the eye, sound waves move the ear, the brain interprets. But what if that arrow isn't one-directional? What if our observation, our attention itself, influences the very patterns we observe? Cognitive science calls this the observer effect, and while it's most often used to describe quantum experiments, it also applies to how our minds construct the world. Each of us doesn't see reality as it is, we see it as our brain predicts it to be. Every perception is a best guess, a merging of memory, expectation, and sensory input. That means the world you perceive is a unique version of the same reality, filtered through your neural lens. But here's where it becomes fascinating. When many people share the same expectations, they begin to align. Neuroscientists have found that groups of people exposed to the same images, words, or experiences begin to show synchronized brain activity, as if their minds are momentarily tuned to the same frequency. In that state, perception itself becomes collective. Some theorists take this further, suggesting that consciousness may be a field, not an isolated event in each brain. Just as a drop of water belongs to the ocean, each thought, memory, and emotion may ripple through a shared sea of awareness. And if that's true, then collective experiences like the Mandela Effect could arise from shifts within that shared field, subtle realignments in the way consciousness projects the world around it. Imagine reality as a fluid hologram, continuously generated by all who observe it. Each mind contributes a piece to the image. When enough observers remember an event a certain way, the hologram adjusts ever so slightly, creating what we interpret as a shared false memory. Yet to the field of consciousness, there's nothing false about it. It's just another possible pattern briefly taking form. This idea isn't new. In ancient traditions, similar concepts appear under different names. The Akashic record in Eastern mysticism, the collective unconscious in Jungian psychology, morphic resonance in modern speculative biology. Each points to a unified storehouse of memory that transcends the individual mind. Perhaps the Mandela Effect isn't about individual recall at all. Perhaps it's a momentary shift in the alignment of that shared memory field, a kind of cultural lucid dream, where many awaken at once and glimpse an alternate configuration of truth. Science, still grounded in material explanation, approaches this cautiously. But even quantum physicists acknowledge that the act of measurement, the act of looking, determines outcomes on the smallest scales. And if the microcosm behaves this way, could the macrocosm, the collective perception of billions, be doing something similar? We think of the mind as something that lives inside the body. But what if the opposite is true? What if the body, and the reality it inhabits, lives inside the mind? If consciousness is the screen upon which the universe is projected, then perhaps the Mandela Effect is not a glitch at all. It may be a gentle reminder that reality and perception are entangled far more deeply than we imagine, and that what we call the world may be a masterpiece we are painting together, one shifting memory at a time. So, if enough people remember something that never happened, is it a mistake of the mind, or the moment when the universe briefly remembers them back? At the smallest scales of existence, where atoms dissolve into waves of probability, the universe behaves in ways that defy ordinary logic. It is there, in the invisible architecture of matter, that science begins to whisper the same questions that philosophy has asked for centuries. Does reality exist independently of observation? Or does it become real only when we look at it? Welcome to the quantum world, where a single particle can exist in multiple places at once, and where measuring that particle forces it to choose a state. This strange principle is known as wave function collapse, and it may hold a clue to the mystery of the Mandela Effect. In 1957, physicist Hugh Everett III proposed something revolutionary. What if the wave never collapses? What if every possible outcome actually happens, each in its own separate branch of the universe? Thus was born the many worlds interpretation, a theory suggesting that reality constantly divides, creating countless parallel timelines where every possibility is played out. In one world, you turn left. In another, you turn right. In one, Mandela dies in prison. In another, he lives to become president. These parallel versions are invisible to us, yet they coexist, layered like the pages of a book written in light. Now, imagine consciousness as the reader of that book. Every decision, every perception turns a page, anchoring us to a particular narrative. But sometimes, perhaps in dreams, déjà vu, or the collective dissonance of the Mandela Effect, we may remember a page from another version of the story, not because we traveled there physically, but because the boundaries between the pages are thinner than we think. Quantum entanglement gives us another clue. When two particles interact, They become linked in such a way that changing one instantly affects the other, no matter the distance. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance. To this day, scientists cannot fully explain why entanglement works, but they know it challenges our very idea of separateness. If everything in the universe was once connected at the moment of the Big Bang, then maybe those connections still exist, woven through space, time, and even thought. And if consciousness is part of that quantum web, then perhaps memories that feel out of place are not errors, but echoes traveling along unseen threads. Some researchers have even speculated that consciousness itself might be quantum in nature. The orchestroar theory, proposed by physicist Roger Penrose and anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff, suggests that microtubules inside the brain could act as quantum processors, tiny arenas where mind and matter intertwine. If that's true, then our awareness could, in principle, interact with the same quantum field that gives birth to parallel realities. A small shift in that field, a quantum fluctuation in perception, might alter the version of history we collectively tune into. It's a poetic thought that memory is not only biological but cosmological, that each recollection, like a particle, exists in a state of potential until we choose to remember it one way or another. Maybe the Mandela effect is a kind of quantum memory bleed, where adjacent versions of reality momentarily overlap, allowing fragments of one timeline to seep into another before separating again. A flicker in the grand experiment of existence. Science hasn't proven this. And yet, quantum mechanics continues to reveal a universe far more fluid and interconnected than our senses suggest. What we perceive as solid and constant may instead be a shimmering network of probabilities, a living ocean of realities, all coexisting, all aware. If the quantum realm allows particles to be in two places at once, then who is to say that our memories cannot? And if reality itself is a vast, unfolding equation, then what happens when the equation remembers a different answer? What if reality isn't the ultimate layer of existence at all? What if it's a program? A living simulation so intricate that it gives rise to thought, emotion, and memory? To some of the brightest scientific minds of our time, this is not science fiction. It's a real and testable possibility. Physicist Nick Bostrom once proposed a now-famous argument. If technological civilizations can create convincing simulations of reality, and if even one civilization does so, then the odds suggest we are already inside one. In such a simulation, every particle, every heartbeat, every memory could be a line of code, and glitches in that code could appear as subtle inconsistencies. Could the Mandela effect be one of those glitches? Moments when the underlying system rewrites a detail, yet leaves behind fragments of the previous version imprinted in our collective memory? To understand this idea, we must first accept how real a simulation could become. Our own virtual worlds are evolving rapidly. Immersive environments, realistic physics engines, and artificial intelligences that learn, adapt, and even dream. Now imagine a simulation not confined to a screen, but projected through every particle in the cosmos. A reality rendered from the inside out, with consciousness as both participant and processor. In such a universe, every conscious being would act as a node, a perceiver and transmitter of information. When enough nodes synchronize, their shared experience forms the rules of the world. The laws of physics, the flow of time, the collective agreement of what is real. But if the system updates, if a variable changes, if a single string of cosmic code is rewritten, then reality could shift ever so slightly, while the memories of its inhabitants may not fully reset. That mismatch, the gap between old memory and new data, could feel exactly like the Mandela effect. In digital simulations, small discrepancies happen all the time. Textures that don't load, sounds that echo twice, a flicker that reminds the player this is all an illusion. If reality is built on an informational substrate, might our shared glitches be its way of self-correcting? Quantum physics once again provides a bridge. At the subatomic level, the world appears pixelated, quantized, as though built from discrete units of energy and information. Even space itself has a minimum resolution, known as the Planck length, below which reality loses definition. To some, This suggests that the universe operates like a computational grid. If that's the case, consciousness could be the interface, the observer's awareness rendering the code into vivid experience. Each act of observation loads a piece of the world. Each act of memory saves it. And when the system refreshes, perhaps not all saved files align perfectly. Yet, there's a deeper beauty in this theory. If we are living in a simulation, that doesn't make our lives less real. It simply redefines what real means. In a simulated cosmos, meaning is not diminished, it's designed. Every decision, every dream, every memory could be part of an evolving program exploring itself. And if the Mandela effect represents a moment when two versions of that simulation briefly overlap, when one update meets the remnants of another, then perhaps we are witnessing the system remembering its own previous versions. Not a failure, but a clue. A sign that consciousness is not trapped within the simulation, but interwoven with the intelligence that runs it. If reality is code, who or what is the coder? And if the program can rewrite itself, could it also be learning to remember us? Time. We like to think of it as a straight line, an arrow pointing from the past toward the future, carrying us forward 1 second at a time. But what if that arrow isn't fixed? What if time, like memory, is not a march, but a conversation? Every moment you experience, this word, this breath, this heartbeat is not isolated. It is entangled with everything that came before and everything that will ever be. Physicists have long suspected that time is not truly linear. Einstein described it as a dimension, a landscape where past, present, and future coexist simultaneously. We perceive it as a sequence because consciousness moves through it, much like a beam of light scanning across the frames of a film reel. But what if consciousness sometimes lingers on a frame it has already passed, or glimpses one it has not yet reached? Would that feel like déjà vu? Would it feel like a false memory, or a memory from another branch of time? In this view, the Mandela effect could be more than a collective mistake. Could be a gentle echo of reality's ability to rewrite itself, a natural byproduct of a universe that's more like a living organism than a static machine. Perhaps, when consciousness collectively re-examines a moment, that moment reshapes to reflect new understanding. The past, after all, is not made of stone. It's made of information. Quantum physics gives us a startling confirmation of this idea through what's called retrocausality. Experiments suggesting that actions performed in the present can affect events in the past. In one such experiment, the behavior of photons changed after the measurements were taken, as if the particles somehow knew what the observer would decide. The universe, it seems, may not distinguish between cause and effect the way we do. If observation in the present can influence the past, then memory, our most intimate form of observation, could be a mechanism of cosmic editing. When millions remember something together, perhaps they momentarily adjust the timeline to match the shared pattern of expectation. And while the physical world corrects itself to the dominant version, faint traces of the alternate remain. Shadows of what once was, flickering like double exposures across the film of time. This would mean that time isn't a river flowing one way, but a sea ebb and flow, tides of consciousness shaping the coastline of reality. Every thought is a ripple, every memory, a wave returning to the shore. Ancient traditions spoke of this fluidity long before science caught up. In Eastern philosophy, the idea of the eternal now dissolves the boundary between past and future. Mystics describe moments of insight where they feel the universe rewrite itself around awareness. Could it be that these visions are not symbolic, but literal experiences of time's elasticity? If the Mandela effect is the mind's record of such elasticity, moments when timelines converge or diverge, then we may be participants in reality's self-editing process. Every act of remembrance becomes a thread in the tapestry of existence, each woven anew each time we recall it. Perhaps the reason these moments fascinate us so deeply is that, beneath the confusion, we sense something extraordinary. That memory is not a window into the past. It's a bridge between worlds. Each recollection may touch not only what once was, but what could still be. And if time can be rewritten by observation, emotion, or collective attention, then maybe the universe isn't just a story being told to us. Maybe it's a story we are co-writing, one breath, one thought, one shifting memory at a time. So when you recall something the world insists never happened, ask yourself, is it your mind that's mistaken, or time itself remembering you differently? What, after all, is reality? Is it what we can touch, measure, and prove, or what we remember, feel, and believe? Because if the Mandela effect has shown us anything, it's that truth may not be as absolute as we once imagined. Imagine this: two people standing in the same room, looking at the same object, yet describing it differently. Who is wrong? Who is right? Perhaps neither. Perhaps both are perceiving equally real versions of that object, shaped by the unique lens of their consciousness. We often assume there is one world, one truth, one timeline. But the more we study memory, quantum behavior, and human perception, the more that assumption trembles. Reality, it seems, is not a single photograph, it's a collage. Each observer contributes a fragment, and together those fragments form a living mosaic that is constantly changing. In this sense, truth might not be a destination, but a consensus, a shared agreement among billions of perceivers about how things appear right now. And when enough people remember something differently, perhaps that consensus shifts, like a kaleidoscope turning ever so slightly, rearranging colors into a new, equally valid pattern. Philosophers have wrestled with this idea for centuries. Plato hinted that the world we see is only a shadow of a deeper, unseen reality. The mystics of many traditions taught that consciousness and the cosmos are reflections of one another, the inner and outer worlds woven from the same luminous thread. And modern thinkers, from William James to Carl Jung, have suggested that the boundaries of mind and matter might be illusions themselves. If memory constructs our sense of the past, and perception constructs our sense of the present, then reality may be the grand intersection of all our stories, a dream we are dreaming together. But what happens when the dreamers disagree? When millions of minds recall a version of the world that no longer matches its physical record? Are these people delusional, or are they glimpsing an alternate pattern of existence that briefly overlapped with our own? In quantum theory, observation determines what becomes real. In human consciousness, belief determines what becomes meaningful. Between those two forces, observation and belief, reality itself may take shape. We don't merely inhabit the universe. We participate in its unfolding. That realization changes everything. Because if reality responds to collective perception, then memory is not just personal, it's creative. Each thought, each image, each remembrance becomes part of the living fabric that defines what exists. And in that sense, the Mandela effect may not be a mistake in our memories at all. It might be a side effect of our creative power, a moment when one version of the shared dream bleeds into another. Perhaps there are infinite versions of truth, each as coherent and alive as the one we stand in now. When we remember something that others do not, we may be touching one of those nearby worlds, a place that existed just long enough for us to carry its echo back here. It's a humbling thought, that truth itself might be multiversal, that reality could be a symphony, not a single note, and our consciousness the instrument through which it's played. So when two memories conflict, when two truths meet, perhaps the question is not which one is wrong, but whether both can be right in their own way. If each memory paints its own world into being, then maybe the universe is vast enough to hold them all. And if that's true, then what does it mean to say that you are real? We began with a question, simple, unsettling, and beautiful. Why do so many remember what history denies? After exploring psychology, quantum theory, and the fluid nature of time, the answer seems both closer and more elusive than ever. Perhaps that is the point. The Mandela effect is not a puzzle to be solved, but an invitation to look inward, to question how reality is woven from awareness itself. Science tells us that the universe is a tapestry of energy and information, constantly in motion. Psychology tells us that memory is fluid, ever rewritten by emotion and context. Philosophy reminds us that what we call truth may be only one perspective in an infinite field of possibilities. And consciousness quietly, patiently connects them all. Maybe our collective memories are not errors at all. Maybe they are traces of a universe that is still evolving, adjusting itself through the minds that observe it. Each human being might be a thread in the grand weave of reality. And when enough minds vibrate at the same frequency, remembering, imagining, believing, the pattern shifts. A logo changes. A line of dialogue bends. A history realigns itself, softly, like a dream turning a page. Could this be how the cosmos grows aware of itself? Through the countless mirrors of human perception, each reflecting a slightly different version of what is, until, together, they reveal the vastness of what could be. The Mandela Effect may be a doorway, not a glitch, a threshold between the physical and the perceptual, between data and meaning. A reminder that reality is not separate from us. It is participating with us. Every act of memory, every spark of imagination, is a quiet act of creation. So perhaps there are no final answers. Perhaps there is only awareness expanding. A universe learning to remember itself through the eyes of those who wonder. When you next encounter a detail that feels different, a word, a symbol, a story you could swear once had another form, pause before dismissing it. Listen to the feeling beneath the confusion. That tremor of recognition may be your consciousness brushing against another version of reality. A whisper from a parallel self, a reflection of how vast your awareness truly is. We often think of memory as something fragile, but what if it is the strongest link between worlds? What if remembering is the universe's way of keeping its possibilities alive? And so we end not with certainty, but with a question. The same question that has haunted philosophers, scientists, and dreamers since the dawn of thought. If consciousness can shape reality, and memory can cross its boundaries, then tell me, where does your universe end, and where does another begin?